I was doing counseling, and also I was working as a therapist, social worker in the dialysis clinic. And I felt like a fraud because I would sit across from patients and I would tell them, these are some little changes that you can make. These are some things that would help you feel better. I would look at the patients at dialysis and think, the two leading causes, diabetes, high blood pressure. I'm on the track to having both of those, and I'm going to be sitting in this chair. I felt like this overwhelming guilt and like I was being a fraud.
Welcome back to Vital Forge Wellness. I'm Mary Moret. I am the nurse practitioner and owner and founder of Vital Forge Clinic. Today's conversation is really, really special to me because Karri has been with me since the very beginning of opening my practice. And we spent years working together, celebrating victories, navigating setbacks, making adjustments, and learning that true health is about so much more than the number on the scale. Yes, Karri has lost over, I want to say 150 pounds, but this is just not only a weight loss journey. She also has a story about resilience, small changes, and that became lifelong habits for her. Discovering underlying hormone and thyroid issues, and what can really happen when a patient and a provider work together over time. Today, we simply just want to share her journey from both of our perspectives, from provider to patient. And we hope you'll see pieces of yourself in this conversation and leave feeling encouraged that lasting change is possible. Thank you, Karri, for being a part of this YouTube video and sharing your experience. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you for having me. I am a mom. I'm a wife, um, daughter, friend, sister. I am also a social worker with over 20 years of experience in the field, medical as well as behavioral health. And I love nature. I love music. Yeah, that's a little bit about me.
And can you tell us, like, what was something in the moment that you knew something had to change?
I think the moment, I've had many throughout my life where I've thought, now's the time I have to do this. And I've struggled to be able to actually do it and keep the weight off when I have lost weight. I think most recently, what kind of got my attention was I was caregiving for my grandma, and my grandma struggled with weight her whole life. She became bedbound. It was difficult for us to lift her. It was difficult for us to change her, do the things that were needed. And then she passed away. And at that moment, I thought, I don't want this to be my life. I don't want to have to rely on people to take care of me and not have them be able to take care of me. And then also now I have time to focus on me. I no longer am having those caregiving duties.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a really good touching story. Do you remember, like, when we had our first visit, what was kind of like your thoughts about it? Were you, like, when you came and stepped into the practice and you're like, I am ready for weight loss? What was kind of running through your head? Like, what were your expectations like at that time?
Yeah, I think the biggest expectation was, is this going to work? The question in my mind. I had done some
Mhm.
research on GLPs. I had looked at some before and after pictures of people. And so I went into it with a hopeful expectation because I knew you and trusted you, but also, the fear of, is this actually going to work?
Yeah, and I think that fear is real for a lot of people, right? You see a lot of influencers out there, you see a lot of good information, bad information, and when it comes to finding a provider who kind of supports you in that journey, that is intimidating in the beginning because I've been there too, and then it's also validating when you finally feel like your progress is going in the right track.
Hmm.
And I just remember, your progress from day one to now. And even I think August 2025, we had some before and afters, and you just continue to
Yeah.
like flourish. So that's super, super cool. And then also super, super validating for you that, lifestyle and sustainability in the sense of like maintaining it is a lifelong process. And I just think about our conversation because Karri is super bright. She's worked as a therapist. She is a social worker. And so the mentality shift of like being the patient and not
Mhm.
guiding the patient, right, is like a whole
Uh-huh.
different mindset. And do you remember the first time when we had our telehealth and we were in a bargaining phase of maybe like doing 2 15-minute workouts of like walking, and you just looked at me and you were like,
Uh-huh.
and I was like, "Oh no." And then the next month you lost like another 20 pounds and you walked every day, and we just laugh and giggle about it now because it's so amazing just to see like how you had to mentally be like, "Okay, I have to shift my mindset and I have to start implementing these changes if I want to see that success." And I get it, like cuz tell them, where did you start? What weight was it that you actually started at?
At my highest that I know of was 310 pounds.
Yeah. And now where are you now?
I go between 148 and about 155. Right now I'm 152.
That is like a healthy fluctuation, right? Life happens and we should never be fixated on a number, right? And so it's not just, tirzepatide that's helped you along your journey. It's also the hormones too, right? And so when we look beyond the scale, at what point did you realize when we were together that weight wasn't the whole story?
Yeah, I think it was, I had started losing weight. And of course, when you start losing weight, you start to feel better. But I noticed that I still had some fatigue, I still had some issues just in general with motivation. And then, of course, the lab work when we went over it was telling as well.
What symptoms do you feel like at that time? And I know it's it's a while back because we've kind of moved through the process together over the years, but what symptoms at that time were you feeling that were affecting your life that you just didn't feel heard in?
I think overall the fatigue was the biggest thing. I would go to work
Mhm.
and come home, and that was it for me. I couldn't do anything else. I had no energy. And I remember telling my husband, our son is going to think that I'm a lazy mom. My son is not going to remember me having energy. I just don't like how I feel. And so I had gone to providers before asking for help with that. And I believed at that point it was in my head, just feeling fatigued and the lack of energy.
Yeah, and I think that's a common, thing that can resonate with a lot of people. We've all been there, and unfortunately, it's prominent everywhere, right? There's so much more to metabolism than throwing somebody a GLP, right? There's
Mhm.
thyroid, there's perimenopause, menopause. There's so many
Mhm.
factors that play that change our resistance to losing weight. We're not in our 20s
Mhm.
having the time of
Mhm.
our life anymore. And then even then, for some people, they still struggle at that age, and people don't know the pre-genetic disposition that goes along with that. So that's the real thing that goes on. And unfortunately for me, you found me, and so we were able to kind of work through that. But it still does occur, for a lot of people.
Yeah.
What surprised you most during this journey of yours? What surprised you most about it?
I think just overall, the fact that I was successful at starting to lose the weight, I started noticing it's coming off, it's staying off. Once I got on the hormone replacements, I was feeling more energized. I was able to complete tasks. I could wear a smaller size. Just overall positive, things that I was noticing in my life.
Yeah, and just to share, and if you're okay with it, what hormones are you kind of currently doing right now in your journey that has worked for you?
So I am on thyroid replacement. I am taking progesterone and also testosterone.
Yeah. And I think when people think of like testosterone for women, it's such a negative thing. Like there's and testosterone can make a huge difference. I think some will think masculizing women or, women don't need it. There's that negative connotation with it that goes with that. But it can be life changing for some. And so, especially when you have fatigue and you have the symptoms, that's super validating. And thyroid, right? The metabolic resistance that it can have, one on just taking GLPs, but also with your weight, if there's that resistance, that's huge. And so
Mhm.
that's really helped your journey. And I see the change from when we started to now, and you just dramatically really have improved, and I'm so happy that
Mhm.
we can share that.
Yeah, I definitely feel so much better too.
How did these changes really impact you and your mindset and just whole around perspective for you? What have you noticed that has helped you?
Well, I will say that when I was prior to starting my weight loss journey and hormone replacements, that I was doing counseling, and also I was working as a therapist, social worker in the dialysis clinic. And I felt like a fraud because I would sit across from patients and I would tell them, these are some little changes that you can make. These are some things that would help you feel better. I would look at the patients at dialysis and think, the two leading causes, diabetes, high blood pressure. I'm on the track to having both of those,
Hmm.
and I'm going to be sitting in this chair. I felt like this overwhelming guilt and like I was being a fraud. And so once I started setting my goals on making my own progress and turning this into my journey, I was able to then feel more genuine in my interactions with other people. I started to feel more confident, smiling more. I started engaging in activities more. I didn't have to stay at home and come up with excuses. I didn't have to look around the room and make sure that I could sit in a chair without being afraid it would break. Those are just some of the things that I think mentally started to change for me.
That literally just gave me goosebumps. So that was really special. And I think, sometimes even if, it just shows you how vulnerable when people work in healthcare are too. We're all human at the end of the day. And I
Mhm,
think a lot of us can relate, And so same thing when I was like a nurse practitioner and I was, 225 pounds. Here I am educating people,
mhm.
right? But sometimes you have to practice what you preach. And it's super important. So it's great that you took that mentality shift and you really applied it because it shows. Now, what was the kind of hardest setback that you had during this journey? Because we know it's not always perfect, right? And we can banter about the fun times when we used to do the bargaining phase and how well you've accomplished those tasks, right? And I just get a giggle every time I look back because I'm like, holy cow, look at this lady. She looks good, after all this time. But what was like the journey in the last couple of years that we've been together during this journey? What were your setbacks and how did you take those setbacks and move forward?
Yeah, I think just being real and honest, the biggest thing is the mental component. It was easy restricting calories. It was easy, making better choices for food. Not so easy exercising. But I think the biggest setbacks were when I didn't see the number change on the scale, when I was trying really hard and I was just maintaining. And I would have
Hmm.
conversations with myself and then with my husband and family and say, is this worth it? Do I want to keep trying to do this? Maybe I'll just throw it in, throw in the towel. But that wasn't what my journey was about. It's not what my journey is about. My journey is about being a healthier person, that doesn't help me towards that goal. And so getting refocused, using my own tools that I would teach people to get back locked in mentally.
That's great. I think that's how you kind of answer my other question. When did you realize it was going to be sustainable? I think sometimes we have conversations with ourselves and it's just, sometimes we're never always going to be perfect. So that's why it's good to have continuous follow up and just kind of, a strict regimen's not going to work for everybody at the end of the day. So you're a human at the end of the day. So food behaviors, lifestyle behaviors, those all play into factor. And so if you're bad one day, right, you can't just beat yourself down. You have to try to trigger that anger in the right direction and move forward. And that's what sustainability looks like to a lot of people at the end of the day, right?
Mhm.
How did it feel to know that somebody was in your corner or that when we did a visit, like I wasn't just prescribing a medication and you were on your way, right? Like, I think one of the biggest takeaways is not every visit has to be scripted or be a cookie cutter way of treating every single patient, right? And so, can you kind of explain that to our viewers?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I felt like previously I had gone and asked for help, and there was one approach. It was You follow these insurance guidelines and do these tests, and then we'll see what we can do. And then it ended up being, we can do nothing because your labs are within range. I feel like our appointments, I could be honest with you and say, I don't feel good. I'm struggling with this, or I was feeling really good. And now all of a sudden I'm kind of tired again. I felt like that was very helpful and I felt very supported. And you would then say, let's run some tests. Let's talk about what we can change. Let's talk about behaviors. Let's see what we can do to make you feel better. It was refreshing.
I love that. And I think that's like a good intake because, I think sometimes when you go as a patient and you go into these clinics, you really don't know what your expectations are, right? Typically, labs aren't the whole story. And I know I go over this through the video and I know it's pretty redundant, but it really isn't the whole story. It's just meant to be like a guideline. And, medicine changes every 5 years. We learn so much more and keeping up with it is like constant. So that's like a really good intake. What I might do for Karri is not going to be the same for the other person. Everybody is in a different journey. And so what might work for you might not work for somebody else, which is really a cool intake. Thank you for sharing that, Karri. I appreciate that.
And I think it's important too to realize that you have to have trust in your provider. So many times people
Mm-hmm.
like myself will go to our providers and be told it's in our head or be brainwashed to believe that we're just, needing to eat less sugar or get out of the house and start exercising. It's not that simple.
Yeah. Touche, touche. Now, I know we talked a lot about your success, but what I'm really curious about is how this has affected your relationships as a mother, as a wife, as a sister, beyond, your capacity of being a therapist, a social worker. Like, how has this affected you personally?
Well, I think some of the biggest things is that, at my heaviest and when I was most tired, I didn't have energy to put into relationships. And so intimacy, it suffered. Quality time with my family suffered. It became more positive when I started on my journey and started feeling better and feeling more confident. I was able then to put more into my relationships and feel confident in them.
Yeah, and I just love the photos of you and your husband, the befores and afters. I just think I'm like, oh my gosh. Like look at your journey. From the 2 months we bargained with 2 15-minute walks. And then you did it was so funny because you did more than I expected. And then when, because I think your journey, first started with weight loss. We didn't start with everything at once, right? Because if the water got too muddy, I always said it would be hard for me as a provider to really personalize it for you. And I think sometimes when we get caught up, we go to these clinics, they're like, you get into like the what do you call it? Like the eye candy of just wanting everything. I want this and I want to get this and I want to get
Yeah.
this. And you're just like, whoa, 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 whoa. Let's slow down because we can definitely get you there. But, I'm not a miracle worker where tomorrow you're going to be like feeling great. And, like the expectations of this growth period and being a long time are really more sustainable when you figure it out. And I think it was like year one. And I was like, you were explaining to me, like, oh, I just feel fatigue. Like, I just, I really need somebody to deep dive in this. I've been dismissed before. And when
Mhm.
we looked at it, I said, okay, Karri, let's look at all your labs, do a deep dive, and we'll go from there. We started with, I believe, the thyroid first. And you can
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, because my ADHD and memory will just jump all over the place. But yeah, so we started with the thyroid and then we started seeing a real difference.
Yeah.
And you're like feeling a lot better because you were poor converter, right? We had some resistance. And so that's very, very common. I think sometimes we can miss those things as providers. So when you functionally treat, it makes a huge difference, right?
Mhm.
And then we started looking at testosterone, and that was a game changer too. And so that's just amazing to see how your relationships kind of thrive during this time because I think you have a lot of support with your friends and family. So that's helpful too.
Yeah.
And I'm sure your son is very proud of you. I'm sure your kids are very, very proud of you.
Yes.
Now kind of looking back and like looking forward, when did that first moment of transformation feel real to you?
It's going to probably sound weird to some people. I think that it was probably around the 50-pound mark before I really realized, hey, this is happening. It wasn't
Yeah.
until I started at 26, 28 size, and I'm not talking 27, 28-inch waist. I'm talking women's 26, 28 pants,
Hmm.
dress sizes. It wasn't until I hit a size 12 that I was like, wow, this is real.
Holy cow. Yeah.
When I started looking at my photos, when I did my before and after, I paused for a second when looking at the pictures and I sent them to you and I said, I didn't recognize this person. It's just amazing when it all starts to click in your mind and the realization actually happens.
Yeah. And did at some point you almost thought, is this impossible? Like, am I achieving
Yeah.
like the impossible? Or, were you just like in disbelief? You're like, I can't believe I made it this far.
Yeah, because, honestly, I had lost some weight in the past and always gained it back. And so I fully expected this time would be
Hmm.
no different. I would start this journey, lose 20, 30 pounds, maybe 50 at max, feel good about myself, and then gain it back. And so, yeah, I thought it was not going to actually happen. And then I thought it was not going to be sustainable for sure.
Another question I have for you is if like there was somebody, because there, that resonates with you, what advice would you give either yourself or someone in that similar situation as you that's even like contemplating, going and doing a deep dive into their hormones or weight loss?
It's a very discouraging place to be. And I see you. I know you. I know what it's like. I've been there. I'm not a different person. I'm still that person. And it is possible. You're valuable. You're worth the investment. And it can happen for you. You have nothing to lose. Just start.
I love that. I love that. That's such great advice. How do you feel about yourself today?
Um, in disbelief, really. Um, Amazed, proud. Um, I didn't expect to get a little bit emotional. I am. I think that this has been a journey that will continue forever. It's a lifestyle change, and I'm super proud of my accomplishments. I'm used to cheering everybody else on. I'm not used to accepting that myself and really feeling it. And I feel proud. I am super grateful to you for being my person that believed in me, that helped me, that was willing to take the time, put in the effort, take my phone calls, explain everything to me, and help me achieve what we've done so far.
I love that. I'm gonna need a pause break because I have a have a little tear.
Same.
Okay. Yeah, I was like, okay, don't water up, Mary, but here I am. I'm watering up some
No,
tears.
I wasn't going to. I told my husband, I was like, "Oh, I'm not going to get emotional. I don't have to worry about it. I'm not that person." Yeah, uh-huh.
I think though it's just because you've really come a long way, Karri. So I'm super proud of you. Okay. So just one more thing. If you're signing up, right, and you're a patient for Vital Forge Clinic or you're even curious, can you tell them how not complicated the process really is and how easy it is just to make that like first step of even if it's like a free consult, right? Because we offer those, how easy it was for you.
Yeah, super easy. You go to the link, you sign up, put your information in, not much information even, and you have your first appointment. And for me, the experience was amazing. Having gone from not so great experiences to being in your office or on the telehealth and having you be non-judgmental and accepting and kind of not even thinking about the stigmas attached to weight or hormone issues. It's super easy. Do the consult, get the information, then make the decision on what to do.
I love that. Thank you, Karri.